You can't just walk away from negotiations. The Zentari ambassador's crystalline form flickered with waves of purple distress, their normally pristine geometric edges becoming notably less acute. Watch me. Ambassador Thompson didn't even look back as she strode toward the exit of the Grand Chamber, her boots clicking satisfyingly against the polished floor. The rest of the human delegation followed, and not a single one of them showed the slightest hint of hesitation. The various alien representatives erupted into chaos. The methane-breathing Huskat began releasing stress pheromones that made their environmental suits fog up. The silicon-based Petrovi started vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter every piece of decorative crystal in the chamber. And the hive mind collective of Ix simply went silent, which was arguably the most disturbing reaction of all. Only High Counselor Zix maintained their composure, all 8 of their eyes narrowing as they watched the humans leave. They had expected many possible outcomes from these talks, but this was unprecedented. Order! I will have order! Zix's booming voice echoed through the chamber, temporarily quieting the pandemonium. Would someone please explain to me how we managed to drive away the only species in the galaxy crazy enough to voluntarily live on death worlds? A nervous chitter ran through the assembly. Finally, the Zentari ambassador spoke up, their crystalline form still notably distressed. We may have made some miscalculations in our approach. Miscalculations? Zix's tone could have frozen a star. Please enlighten us. The Petrovi representative vibrated forward. We simply presented them with the standard terms of admission to the Galactic Council. Category 4 restricted technology access, limited colonial expansion rights, and standard resource quotas. The same package we offer all emerging civilizations. A harsh laugh came from the human observer who remained behind. Dr. Patel, if Zix remembered correctly. The aging scientist had been appointed as a cultural liaison early in the negotiations, and unlike her colleagues, she hadn't stormed out. Instead, she stood there with an expression that the Council's xenopsychologists would later classify as barely contained amusement. Would you care to share what you find so entertaining, Dr. Patel? Zix asked. Oh, where to begin? She pulled out a small device, a tablet, the humans called it, and began scrolling through what appeared to be notes. First, you classified Earth as a death world due to its high gravity, volatile weather patterns, and diversity of predatory species. Fair enough. But then you tried to restrict our technology development because you decided we're too primitive to handle advanced tech responsibly. She paused, looking up at the assembly with a raised eyebrow. You do realize we achieved faster-than-light travel while simultaneously maintaining 7 different ways to destroy our entire planet, right? We didn't give up on nuclear weapons. We just got better at diplomatic relations. Eventually. The Hizket representative's environmental suit was now completely opaque from stress-induced fog. But that's precisely why we need to implement restrictions. Your species is clearly too volatile, too unpredictable. Ah, yes, Dr. Patel continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Because nothing says welcome to galactic civilization quite like telling a species that survived multiple near-extinction events, developed space travel while dealing with climate change, and managed not to blow themselves up despite having the capability to do so for over a century, that they're too volatile to be trusted. The collective of Ix broke their silence with a harmonized thought broadcast. The human's departure poses significant concerns. Our predictive models indicate a 78.3% probability that they will continue technological advancement without our oversight. Oh, it's much higher than that, Dr. Patel said cheerfully. I'd say it's closer to 100%. You see, here's what you don't understand about humans. We're stubborn. Ridiculously, impossibly stubborn. Tell us we can't do something, and we'll not only do it, but find 16 different ways to do it better, faster, and probably cheaper. She began pacing the chamber, warming to her topic. You looked at our history and saw violence, conflict, and chaos. What you failed to see was the innovation, the adaptation, the sheer determined creativity that came from all of that mess. You saw a species that fought countless wars and thought volatile. We saw each war as a lesson in what not to do next time. The Zentari ambassador's crystalline form had shifted from purple to a concerned shade of blue. But the regulations are for your own protection. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. More dangerous than a planet where the air itself can kill you during a storm? More dangerous than a world where tiny invisible organisms can cause global pandemics? More dangerous than a place where the ground occasionally splits open and spews molten rock? Dr. Patel shook her head. We didn't survive Earth by playing it safe. We survived by learning, adapting, and occasionally telling physics itself to take a seat while we figured out a workaround. High Counselor Zix had been unusually quiet during this exchange, their 8 eyes focused intently on Dr. Patel. Finally, they spoke. You seem remarkably calm about this situation, Doctor. One might even say, prepared. Of course I am, she replied with a smile that made several species in the chamber instinctively back away. This isn't the first time humanity has faced this kind of situation. Throughout our history, whenever someone has tried to impose arbitrary restrictions on human development, it's generally ended one of 2 ways. Either they eventually realize we're going to progress with or without their approval, or they learn the hard way that trying to contain human innovation is like trying to hold back an ocean with a paper cup. The collective of Ix broadcast again, their unified thoughts tinged with confusion. Query: are you suggesting that your species deliberately anticipated and planned for this outcome? Let's just say we came prepared for multiple scenarios. Speaking of which, Dr. Patel checked her tablet again. Right about now, our ships should be leaving your space dock. You'll notice we've left behind detailed specifications for our FTL drive design. Consider it a gesture of good faith. We figured you might want to study it, especially since it's about 30% more efficient than your current models. The chamber erupted once again, this time with multiple species rushing to their own data terminals to verify this claim. The Petrovi representative's vibrations reached a frequency that actually did shatter several decorative crystals. But that's impossible, the Zentari ambassador sputtered, their form now cycling through colors faster than most species could track. Your civilization only achieved FTL capability 3 years ago. 2 years, 8 months, and 14 days ago, to be precise, Dr. Patel corrected. And yes, we managed to improve on the basic design rather quickly. Turns out when you spend centuries dreaming about the stars while stuck on a death world, you get pretty good at thinking outside the box, or thinking outside the dimension, in this case. High Counselor Zix raised all 4 of their hands, calling for silence. Dr. Patel, are you saying that humanity is willing to share advanced technology with us, even after walking away from these negotiations? Of course, she replied. We're not interested in isolation or superiority. We genuinely want to be part of the galactic community. We just refuse to be part of it as second-class citizens. Humanity has spent too long fighting against artificial hierarchies on our own world to accept them on a galactic scale. She started walking toward the exit herself now, but paused at the doorway. Here's what's going to happen next. We're going to continue exploring space, developing technology, and expanding our understanding of the universe. We're going to keep sharing our innovations with any species willing to treat us as equals, and we're going to do it all while maintaining our independence. The doctor's expression softened slightly, but we're also going to leave our channels of communication open. When you're ready to negotiate as equals, truly ready, you'll find us willing to talk. Just remember, humanity didn't survive and thrive on a death world by accepting arbitrary limitations. We did it by pushing boundaries, questioning assumptions, and occasionally doing things that everyone else considered impossible. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind a chamber full of stunned aliens and one final message displaying on their shared data network. Attention! Human FTL specifications have been uploaded to the General Access database. Additionally, we've taken the liberty of noting several potential improvements to your current artificial gravity systems. You're welcome. P.S. Yes, we noticed the surveillance devices you planted on our ships. We left them in place but modified them slightly. They now broadcast continuous loops of something we call cat videos. Consider it your introduction to human entertainment culture. Trust us, they're addictive. Bah. As the message finished scrolling across every screen in the chamber, High Counselor Zix did something that none of the assembled species had ever witnessed in their centuries of service. They laughed. It started as a low rumble and built into a full-throated sound that seemed to contain equal parts amusement and resignation. Well, they said finally, wiping tears from several of their eyes. It appears we have a choice to make. We can either adapt our approach to deal with this fascinating species of chaos-surfing deathworlders, or we can watch them revolutionize half the galaxy while we stick to our outdated protocols. The collective of Ix broadcast a thought that, for the first time in their recorded history, contained a distinct note of humor. Prediction: the humans will revolutionize the galaxy regardless of our choice. The only variable is whether we will benefit from the process or merely observe it. Indeed, Zix agreed, still chuckling. though I suspect merely observing humanity is going to prove far more entertaining than anyone anticipated. Now, would someone please explain to me why I'm suddenly feeling an inexplicable urge to watch these cat videos? As if in answer, every screen in the chamber suddenly filled with the image of a small earth feline attempting to fit itself into a container clearly too small for its body, accompanied by what appeared to be human laughter in the background. The Zentari ambassador's crystalline form finally settled on a color that the Council's xenopsychologists would later classify as bemused acceptance. I believe, they said slowly, that we may have seriously underestimated the human's capacity for both technological advancement and psychological warfare. Correction. The collective of X broadcast. We have underestimated their capacity for everything, and based on our analysis of these cat videos, we suspect that may be exactly what they wanted. High Counselor Zix watched as the assembled representatives, despite their best attempts at maintaining dignity, became increasingly engrossed in the continuing stream of feline-based entertainment. Schedule an emergency session for tomorrow, they announced. First item on the agenda, reassessment of all protocols regarding emerging civilizations. Second item, establishing a committee to study human entertainment media. I have a feeling we're going to need to understand both if we want to keep up with our new friends. As the chamber slowly emptied, the screens continued their endless parade of Earth cats, each one seeming to wear an expression that, much like humanity itself, somehow managed to combine innocence, chaos, and absolute confidence in defying the apparent limitations of their existence. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, aboard the departing human vessels, Ambassador Thompson finally allowed herself to smile. Dr. Patel's message received and confirmed, she announced to her crew. Operation Just Watch Us is officially underway. Set course for Earth, maximum speed. And someone please make sure we're recording when they discover the keyboard cat archives we left in their database. Crix paused, their crystalline form shifting to display what appeared to be the human announcement. They've also added, and I quote, "Plus the background radiation makes for amazing coffee." Zix slumped in their gravity chair. Of course they're making beverages from deadly radiation. Of course they are. What's next? Swimming pools and black holes? Funny you should mention that, Crix began. No, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Zix raised all four hands in surrender. Just, what are they trading? That's the interesting part, Crix replied, their crystalline form shifting to display a holographic inventory. They're offering solutions to problems we didn't even know we had. Remember those cat videos they left behind? How could anyone forget? The collective of Ix has established an entire research division dedicated to studying them. Well, it turns out those weren't just entertainment. The humans were using them to demonstrate principles of gravity manipulation, inertial dampening, and spatial navigation. Their cat's ability to land on their feet apparently inspired several breakthrough technologies in personal shield systems. Zix stared at their colleague. Are you telling me that humanity's greatest technological achievements were inspired by their furry pets? Not all of them, came a familiar voice from the doorway. Dr. Patel stood there looking entirely too pleased with herself. Some of them were inspired by dogs. Have you seen how they shake off water? The applications for molecular reorganization are fascinating. Dr. Patel, Zix acknowledged, trying to maintain their dignity. I wasn't aware you were still in the sector. Oh, I've been around. Someone has to explain human idioms to your cultural research team. Did you know they spent 3 weeks trying to figure out why humans keep saying, "hold my beer," before doing something spectacular and/or terrible? We've established a dedicated linguistic division just for human expressions, Zix admitted. The phrase yeet has caused particular confusion. Wait until they discover memes, Dr. Patel muttered, before continuing in a clearer voice. But I'm actually here about Trading Post Impossible. We're hosting an open house next week. Consider this your formal invitation. Crix's form shifted to a shade that indicated intense interest. In the middle of a radiation storm? Oh, that's not a problem anymore. We figured out how to manipulate the plasma streams into a pretty decent shield array. Makes the whole place look like it's wrapped in aurora borealis. Very aesthetic. But how? Zix couldn't keep the exasperation from their voice. Would you believe it started with someone trying to recreate the Rainbow Bridge from Norse mythology? Dr. Patel grinned. One of our engineers got very drunk, watched Thor one too many times, and decided to see if they could manipulate plasma streams into a stable transportation system. Turns out you can. The radiation actually helps stabilize the whole thing, which was a nice bonus. Your species continues to confound all logical analysis. The collective of Ix broadcast suddenly, their avatar materializing in the chamber. We have dedicated 43% of our processing power to understanding human innovation methods, and we are still unable to predict your technological development paths. That's because you're looking for logic, Dr. Patel explained. Try looking for someone saying, "Wouldn't it be cool if," instead. You'll have much better luck. Example requested, the collective prompted. Well, take Trading Post Impossible. It started because someone said, "Wouldn't it be cool if we built a space truck stop that looks like it's on fire all the time?" Next thing you know, we're revolutionizing plasma containment technology and discovering that certain types of radiation make excellent flavor enhancers for coffee beans. Your species deliberately pursues dangerous ideas because they are cool. The collective's avatar flickered with what might have been concern. Not exactly. We pursue them because they're interesting, and then we figure out how to make them safe-ish afterward. It's a process. Define safe-ish, Zix requested, already dreading the answer. Safe enough that probably nothing will explode unless we want it to, Dr. Patel replied cheerfully. Speaking of which, you might want to update your emergency protocols. We're planning a little demonstration during the open house. Nothing major. Just a controlled stellar phenomenon or two. Controlled stellar? Zix began, then stopped. No. Never mind. I don't want to know. Just, please tell me you're at least following basic safety protocols? Of course! We've got everything under control. Probably. Mostly. Dr. Patel checked her tablet. Oh, and bring cameras to the open house. Trust me, you're going to want to document this. We're thinking of calling it Aurora Australis in Space, the remix. As she turned to leave, she paused. Oh, and one more thing. We've finally figured out how to synthesize that drink you all found in our database. You know, the one called coffee? We're giving out free samples at the open house. Fair warning, though. We had to modify it slightly to account for different species' biochemistry. The HFY version might make them temporarily change color, but we're pretty sure that's harmless. Pretty sure? Crix vibrated with alarm. Well, the test subjects all seemed to enjoy it, even if some of them did start speaking in iambic pentameter afterward, but that wore off, eventually. With that, she was gone, leaving behind a stunned silence broken only by the soft hum of the collective's avatar processing this new information. Finally, Zix spoke. Schedule an emergency session of the full council, and someone find out what iambic pentameter is, just in case. Already done, the collective broadcast. It appears to be a form of human verbal expression, often associated with their entertainment format known as Shakespeare. Warning. Preliminary analysis suggests exposure may result in spontaneous soliloquies. Wonderful, Zix muttered. They're not just rewriting the laws of physics. They're doing it with a soundtrack. They paused, then added, send a message accepting the invitation to their open house, and add a request for their coffee synthesis protocols. Might as well see what all the fuss is about. Query, the collective broadcast. Should we inform them that we have already reverse-engineered their cat video database and created an AI dedicated to generating new ones? Absolutely not, Zix replied firmly. The last thing we need is for them to know we're trying to beat them at their own game. Besides, have you seen the ones they're producing now? Somehow they've taught the cats to dance to something called synthwave. We're centuries away from matching that level of whatever that is. Understood, the collective acknowledged. Though our analysis suggests that the dancing cats may also contain encrypted data about quantum entanglement experiments. We are still attempting to determine if this is intentional or if humans simply cannot help combining groundbreaking physics with pet videos. At this point, Zix sighed. I'm not sure even they know anymore. Send the acceptance to their open house. And add a note requesting they bring more cat videos. For scientific purposes, of course. Of course, the collective agreed, their avatar flickering with what might have been amusement. Shall we also inquire about their progress on the reported black hole swimming pool project? Don't even joke about that, Zix warned. Knowing them, they've probably already figured out how to turn quantum singularities into water slides. Somewhere in the Vermilion Nebula, aboard Trading Post Impossible, Dr. Patel read the council's response and smiled. They're coming, she announced to the station's crew. And they want more cat videos. Perfect, the station commander replied, watching as another plasma stream wrapped itself around the station like a luminous ribbon. Should we tell them about the quantum singularity water slide yet? Let's save that for the after-party, Dr. Patel suggested. Along with the zero-gravity disco ball we made from compressed stellar matter. Gotta keep some surprises, after all. True, the commander agreed. Besides, we haven't figured out how to stop it from occasionally creating tiny temporary universes when the base drops. Feature, not a bug, Dr. Patel declared. Now, who's up for testing the nebula-charged espresso machine? I think I've almost got it calibrated to stop causing temporal hiccups. As the station's crew enthusiastically volunteered, the Vermilion Nebula continued its eternal dance around them, its radiation storms now forming patterns that looked suspiciously like Earth cats chasing laser pointers across the cosmos. Whether this was an intentional effect of the human's plasma manipulation technology, or just the universe deciding to get in on the joke remained to be seen. Either way, it made for one hell of a screensaver. The open house. The arrival of the Galactic Council delegation at Trading Post Impossible was, in typical human fashion, both precisely planned and completely chaotic. So much more. Did you know there's an entire human profession based around deliberately going to dangerous places and almost dying for entertainment purposes? They're called social media influencers. I think, Katok chimed faintly, we're going to need more insurance. Already handled it, Jennifer said brightly. I've negotiated new policies with 17 different interdimensional insurance providers. Also, I may have accidentally invented a new form of quantum economics while explaining human survival rates to the actuaries. Accidentally? Well, when they asked me to calculate the probability of human survival in impossible situations, I had to factor in the human tendency to survive specifically because something is impossible. Turns out that creates some interesting paradoxes in probability space. Is that why the mathematics department is currently having an existential crisis? Probably. Though that might also be because I showed them how humans use interpretive dance to solve complex equations when conventional methods fail. Katok and Shady exchanged glances. They had a feeling this was just the beginning of their education in human survival techniques. They weren't wrong, but that's definitely a story for another time. Chapter 5. The Field Test. This seems like a terrible idea, Katok chimed nervously, his crystalline structure flickering with anxiety patterns as he watched Jennifer suit up for her first field test. That's how you know it's going to work, Jennifer replied cheerfully, checking the straps on her definitely not standard-issue equipment harness. Terrible ideas are humanity's specialty. They were standing in the Guild's advanced testing chamber, a massive room designed to simulate various assassination scenarios. Today's test, the new Mark 7 quantum destabilizer, guaranteed to unravel any target's molecular structure across 7 parallel dimensions. Shady descended from her ceiling perch, tentacles writhing with concern. Are you sure about this? The last 3 test dummies literally ceased to exist. Technically, they didn't cease to exist, Jennifer corrected, pulling out a rubber duck from one of her many tactical pouches. They just exist everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, which, by the way, gave me a great idea for a new transportation system. But we'll discuss that later. The Guildmaster specifically requested that you stop inventing new forms of transportation, Katok reminded her. We're still dealing with the paperwork from your emergency escape via tactical probability manipulation proposal. Hey, that worked perfectly. It's not my fault the test subject ended up becoming their own grandmother. Time paradoxes are notoriously tricky to navigate. They're still attending family therapy sessions with themselves. But they survived, Jennifer pointed out brightly. Which, may I remind you, is the whole point of my job. She finished her equipment check and gave the rubber duck a squeeze, producing a squeak that somehow managed to sound both cheerful and ominous. What's the duck for? Shady asked, though she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know. Quantum stability monitoring, obviously. If it starts squeaking in frequencies that don't exist, we'll know we're approaching critical probability collapse. The delegation gasped collectively. Even the collective, which was quite a feat given their usual unified composure. Before them, the Vermilion Nebula stretched out in all its deadly glory. Except it wasn't just a view. Somehow, the humans had found a way to interact with it. Watch this, Commander Harrison said, making a gesture that caused streams of plasma to weave themselves into complex patterns. We figured out how to use the nebula's radiation as a sort of cosmic loom. We're weaving raw energy into stable forms. Want to see what happens when you knit with space-time? Before anyone could politely decline, he made another gesture. The plasma streams began to dance, forming themselves into what appeared to be... Is that a sweater? Crix asked, their crystalline form shifting through shades of disbelief. Yep, Harrison beamed. We call it nebulaware. Completely safe, mostly stable, and it keeps you at the perfect temperature by technically existing in multiple thermal states simultaneously. Plus it glows in the dark. But why? Zixx couldn't help asking. Why not? Dr. Patel countered. Besides, it's not just about making fancy clothes. This technology has huge implications for energy manipulation, matter stabilization, and, she paused for effect, solving the galaxy's waste management problems. That got their attention. Waste management had been a growing crisis in several sectors. You see, she continued, once you understand how to knit with space-time, you can pretty much reorganize matter however you want. We've already converted 3 ancient garbage asteroids into useful raw materials. The process generates enough excess energy to power this entire station, and the only byproduct is a light show that our cats seem to find endlessly entertaining. The collective's avatars had multiplied again, now frantically analyzing every aspect of the technology. This defies multiple laws of physics, they broadcast. Only the laws we know about, Harrison pointed out cheerfully. Turns out the universe has a lot more rules than anyone thought. They're just written in more of a suggestions format. Speaking of which, who's ready to try the coffee? Before anyone could respond, an alarm started chiming. Not an emergency klaxon, but rather what sounded suspiciously like an old Earth ice cream truck jingle. Ah, perfect timing! Dr. Patel clapped her hands. The temporal anomaly we ordered is here. Who wants to see what happens when you use localized time dilation to age coffee beans through multiple quantum timelines simultaneously? Multiple quantum timelines? Zixx repeated faintly. Well, we figured if one timeline's worth of aging makes good coffee, why not try a few thousand at once? Fair warning, some cups might contain traces of alternate realities where coffee evolved sentience. But don't worry, they're usually quite friendly, and they give excellent financial advice. Commander Harrison nodded sagely. I made my best investments based on tips from a cappuccino that had lived through the rise and fall of 17 different stock markets across the multiverse. The collective's avatars were now vibrating at a frequency that suggested either intense scientific excitement or an existential crisis. Possibly both. Humans have weaponized quantum uncertainty to make better beverages? Among other things, Dr. Patel admitted. Though personally, I'm more excited about our latest project. We've been experimenting with using similar principles to create what we're calling probability engines. Imagine being able to navigate through not just space, but possibility itself. And what would be the practical application of such technology? Crix asked, trying to sound professional despite their obvious fascination. Well, for starters, it would make parallel parking a lot easier, Harrison said with a straight face. But more importantly, it could revolutionize everything from disaster prevention to resource management. Plus, it makes for some really interesting card tricks. To demonstrate, he pulled a deck of cards from his pocket and performed a shuffle that somehow involved the cards existing in multiple locations simultaneously before resolving into a perfect royal flush, in 7 different suits, some of which were glowing. That's impossible, Zixx stammered. Impossible is just a thing that hasn't met humanity yet, Dr. Patel replied with a wink. Now who's ready for the really interesting demonstrations? We haven't even shown you the Quantum Cat Cafe yet. The what? The entire delegation asked in unison. Oh, it's delightful. We've got cats that exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. They're simultaneously asleep and awake in various boxes around the station. Schrödinger would have loved it, though he might have been a bit concerned about the part where some of them learn to phase through walls. But don't worry. They only do that when they're hungry, or curious, or bored, or... As Dr. Patel continued her explanation, a cat that seemed to be made entirely of condensed starlight strolled past, trailing small galaxies in its wake. Nobody was quite sure if it was real or a hologram or something in between, but it purred with a sound that somehow contained echoes of the Big Bang. Commander Harrison smiled at their stunned expressions. Just wait until you see what happens when we turn on the disco ball we made from compressed dark matter. But maybe we should save that for after the quantum coffee tasting. Speaking of which, anyone want to try our special blend? We call it Schrödinger's Roast. It's simultaneously the strongest and weakest coffee in existence until you observe it. The delegation shared a look that somehow conveyed both terror and irresistible curiosity. Finally, High Counselor Zixx spoke for all of them. We'll take 2 of everything. For scientific purposes, of course. Of course, Dr. Patel agreed solemnly, though her eyes twinkled with barely suppressed mirth. And just wait until you see what happens when we introduce you to our latest invention. We call it the most interesting cat in the multiverse. It exists in every possible reality simultaneously, and somehow always lands on its feet in all of them at once. As if on cue, a cat that seemed to be made of pure probabilities sauntered past, somehow managing to look smug in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Galactic Council delegation could only watch in a mixture of horror and fascination as humanity continued to casually revolutionize physics while making coffee and petting cats. It was becoming increasingly clear that their initial assessment of humans as too volatile had been both completely correct and entirely beside the point. They weren't too volatile. They were exactly volatile enough to make the impossible not just possible, but somehow also commercially viable and aesthetically pleasing. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the Vermilion Nebula, a cat that may or may not have existed in this particular reality batted playfully at a string of pure probability, causing ripples in space-time that just happened to form the shape of a smile. The end.